Hello again, and welcome to the SEC Daily here at Southeastern 14. I'm Chris Lee, joined by my co-host Blake Lovell. Today, we will rank the SEC games this weekend in order of our interest in watching them. There are 6 games. Only one of those involves a non-SEC team, that is Mississippi State and Western Michigan. We'll also get a little bit more into Missouri and LSU, one of my favorite matchups, not just in the SEC, but nationally to watch this week for reasons I will give later. Our show is presented by our friends at My Perfect Franchise and CHOMPS, always looking for more advertising partners. So if you're interested in that, reach out to caroline.smith at Southeastern 14 if you're interested. Blake Lovell, we are almost to the midway point of the season. It has been fascinating. Cannot wait for this weekend's games. There's not as many of them, but I can give you compelling reasons to watch pretty much all of them.
Yeah, compelling, stronger than others, and for certain games,
For sure.
stronger word than others. But yeah, I'm with you. The way this is set up, like we said, just based on how teams have played to this point. Alabama back, Texas A&M back, Missouri back, like LSU struggling. Great opportunity for Missouri. Kentucky football back. Georgia still undefeated. So you just think of those 3 games in particular, and then you've got very interesting storylines with Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Florida Vanderbilt too. But yeah, I think the way the season's unfolded at this point, it's made for a fun schedule here just on paper. So
Yes, it has. And really, there's only one. I guess there's really not any dog weeks of football left. You've always got that next to last weekend of the regular season where you've got some teams playing FBS teams, but looking up at that, you still got Georgia at Tennessee, Kentucky at South Carolina, games like that in there. So yeah, even that'll probably be the worst remaining week, but even that one will have some things for us to watch. But speaking of things to watch, this weekend, again, we've got 6 games involving SEC teams, and Blake and I are going to rank those in reverse order of which we are most interested in watching. In other words, 6 would be we've got the least interest in watching, 1 would be the most. All right, Blake, let's start with this one. And I think number 6 was a pretty easy pick. Some others, as we got closer, it was a little harder for me to distinguish. People will probably take issues with those picks, but I think the 11 o'clock kickoff when Western Michigan, coached I think by Lance Taylor, comes to Starkville to face Mississippi State. That one is going to be an 11 o'clock kickoff on the SEC network, both teams 2 and 3. And Blake, if you're wondering, is this one of these games where you've got one of these pesky MAC teams that comes in and has a chance of pulling an upset? I think the best way I would put it is this way. If you matched up Vanderbilt and Western Michigan right now, looking at the computers, Vanderbilt will be approximately a 10-point favorite, which tells you a lot about Western Michigan's chances of pulling an upset.
yeah, it's a lot of words to say that this is a game that should be in Mississippi State's favor. I mean, but look, it's Western Michigan. What they
Blake,
beat Ball
I had to
State
come with something, buddy.
Listen, they beat Ball State last week, so we can't just completely discount this, right? But yeah, if you kind of look at the way the season's gone thus far, yeah, I would say Mississippi State, the get right game. I don't know that this completely, changes their season by any means, but yeah, it is one that I think that they should win. Like I said, though, I mean, Ball State's not had a great start to the season, but Western Michigan snapping a 3-game losing streak to get that win, and Mississippi State looking for anything right now. I think to kind of be positive about moving forward. So yeah, I think this would be my number 6 on the rankings this week. Nothing against Mississippi State or their fan base or anyone involved with Mississippi State athletics, but when you've got 5 other SEC games and this one's the non-SEC game against a under 500 MAC team, I'll probably rank this one at the bottom.
By the way, if you're wondering, where's that preview on your channel? You guys preview all the games every week. We do. Haven't gotten to it yet. We will get to that this afternoon, as we will with the next game. That is Vanderbilt's road trip to Florida in a rematch of a game where Vanderbilt had an upset a year ago. That one was a double-digit line. I want to say from memory, Florida was about a 14-point favorite. Coming to Nashville, it is an 18.5-point favorite. according to the last thing that I've got in this one. And one big reason for that, I think Billy Napier has lost 2 games in Gainesville, and I think is 1-8 on the road, or whatever that number is. I think it's 1 win. And so Florida, a much different team in Gainesville than it is on the road. Vanderbilt, just frankly not a good team anywhere. I will give you some things to watch in that one. And look, I think this is a game that you can still find some compelling storylines too. Again, some of these will have to look a lot harder, but Vanderbilt, I think, is going to go with Ken Seals at quarterback again this week. They played better last week. They didn't turn the ball over as much. Florida has been a little bit up and down, and we went into that game at Kentucky last week going, hey, we really don't know. We can't make up our mind between these two teams. Florida was very underwhelming in that loss at Utah and looked like a top 10 team in beating Tennessee and Knoxville, and then has been very pedestrian again, losing to last week at Kentucky and just kind of underwhelming against Charlotte last week. So I think the storyline with Florida is, can it look a little bit better? And if Florida goes and beats Vanderbilt by 3, 4, 5 touchdowns, you have to feel a little better coming out of it. Again, that's nowhere near the stratosphere of the games to come, but I am a little bit interested to see if both teams show up. I think Vanderbilt can play better than it's played. It has not covered the spread in any of its 6 games so far. So those are my reasons for watching Vanderbilt in Florida. I suspect that's a longer list than your reasons.
I suspect you're right. I think that was a rehearsal for the Vanderbilt, Florida preview and predictions video that Chris is going to be doing right after this. And I know Florida fans, Vanderbilt fans too, we haven't got that one up this week. We did get the other 4 up on Monday, but scheduling issues and that kind of stuff, we had to push this one back a couple of days. So, yeah, this was probably lower on the list. And you said Vanderbilt is not covered or what's the
not covered in a game yet.
They haven't covered a game yet, but that's not even just the story here. They haven't covered in a game since November the 19th, 2022. Ooh. So that would be the Florida game. So they're going on 11 months without covering it, which of course they don't play a game every month. But yeah, haven't covered the spread in a game since the Florida game, November 19th, 2022. So again, 13.5. Florida was a favorite in that. Vanderbilt won the game straight up. Florida 18.5 point favorite right now on this one. That line's not really moving. And so, yeah, that's at least worth noting. But yes, if I had to do my rankings, I would also put this game at number 5 on the 6-game list this week.
Yeah, and if you're doing a viewer's guide, you got one TV to watch, and hopefully you got more than one TV to watch. I'm watching 2 at all times on Saturdays, but that one is at 3 Central, and Alabama and A&M, which we'll talk about in a minute, is at 2:30. So you probably won't be tuning in to watch that one, except for maybe the last 30 minutes. And I actually presume A&M will go longer than Vandy, Florida, just because it's the CBS TV game. So anyway, probably not a lot of people are going to be watching that one, but that's your window. See if it's interesting at the end and tune in if you're otherwise watching Alabama and A&M, which most of you are going to be. All right, number 4. And this is the last of the games where you have to struggle more to find reasons. Arkansas at Ole Miss. Just waiting to see if Arkansas shows up with the kind of team we thought it could show up with. I felt like that BYU game really got Arkansas off track. The injuries are piling up, and so I have some doubts about Arkansas's ability in this one for that reason alone. And then Ole Miss, hey, we kind of buried Ole Miss last week, said, hey, they finally ran into a good team and didn't do anything. Well, hold my beer. 706 yards, beat LSU Saturday in one of the better college football games in terms of just excitement level that you'll see. And so interesting to see if Arkansas can get back on track a little bit, and if Ole Miss can sort of avoid a letdown after a very emotional win in which the Rebels came back from, I think 8 or 9 down in the final half of a quarter to win.
Yeah, I think we had been saying it. I think for Ole Miss, it wasn't winning games; it was beating good teams, and that was something that just is not. They've not consistently done that over the past couple of seasons, and so you wanted to kind of see if they could do that against LSU. Although some people might say, "Well, is LSU considered a good team at this point?" Considering their struggle, still think they are among the most talented. Now, certainly they've lost a couple games now, and as we said, that could kind of change the course of their season, especially given who they're about to play this week, which we'll talk about that game in a second. But yeah, I think this is one that, given how Arkansas season is gone, I know this is going to like be ranked lower in terms of like this will probably be fourth on the list, just given what's at stake with the other 3 games ahead of it. But if you're talking entertainment value, like I still think this one could rank either first or second, just because I think you've got Ole Miss involved. But you go back to the game last week against LSU, thrilling, entertaining game, high scoring. And you've still got Arkansas, I think, that's got that potential to put those wild kind of games together. We kind of saw it against LSU. BYU game was wild for different reasons. A&M game was, like I said, a little more boring than you would expect from an Arkansas Texas A&M game. So maybe this is the kind of point where Arkansas turns it back in the other direction. I know Arkansas fans are hoping that's the case, but night game, Oxford again, the setting, I could see this being very, very kind of entertaining. I think you just expect it from these 2 teams. I don't think there will be a lack of points. But yes, if you're comparing to the other 3 ahead of them, you're probably still going to put this one at 4.
Well, and look, there's some stuff on the Ole Miss side too. We can't just presume Ole Miss is going to be the offense that it was last week. Quinshon Judkins has really only had one great game so far. We all think he's a great back, but it just didn't show up the first 4 weeks in production. So there's a question there too of, is that repeatable this year? I mean, I think obviously it is, but what are we going to see? I would not have expected us to go 4 games into the season with his production being what it was.
Yeah, may not be repeatable because they're not going to see LSU's defense again playing like that. So hopefully, I don't know though. I mean, again, we'll see what happens with this week. I mean, I say that half jokingly. I think LSU's defense gets a lot better from here. We'll see. Missouri fans hoping it waits a week if it does, but yeah, I still think there's a lot. It's a lot of must watch possibility with this Ole Miss Arkansas game. It's just yeah, it's just Arkansas does not have, the kind of momentum you would have expected this Arkansas team to have, coming in having lost 3 straight, and Ole Miss seemingly back on track. It just doesn't seem like a great setup for the Razorbacks.
I presume, is that the way that you would have ranked those games, is 6, 5, and 4 in the order that I ranked them? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you would switch them. Now, here's where things get interesting to me. Now, I think is where you've got to really try to figure out. Now, certainly, if you are a fan of any of these teams, you're going to rank your team ahead. But us trying to, as neutral, overseers of SEC football here, this is where it gets interesting, because I have a hard time trying to figure out how to rank these 3.
I did too, and this is a lot like power rankings. What's the purpose of power rankings, really? It's just to see how many people will get mad at you in the comments. I mean, let's be honest. It's not why we do it, but you read the comments sometimes, you would think that's why we do it. And I have a feeling this is going to be the same way. Somebody's going to be mad at us for our rankings because these are 3 terrific games, and you can't help but lose doing this exercise, but we press on anyway, Blake Lovell.
Well, look, listen, give us your own rankings. Like I always say this, we're not trying to tell you how to think here. Like, you have your own rankings, and that's your own deal. Like, we're going to give our rankings, but we are not doing this as a science. We say that every week with power rankings. Like, this isn't a science. It's just opinions. Like, so what? Like, you don't have to value our opinion any more than you want to. So there you go.
All right, your number 3 game. I'm going to let you lead this one. Who's your number 3
look at
game?
this. See, all of a sudden things get difficult. You're going to turn it back to me. I'm stunned by this turn of events. Oh, I'm shocked that all of a sudden I'm put in this position to do this. Boy, of course you would do this to me.
You thought we were friends, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about surprising you a little bit here, because there's a game that I think I'm going to have lower on my list than people would expect, probably. And it's because I feel pretty confident about one side. I mean, I think given what's at stake for Missouri and LSU, for Missouri standpoint, I mean, for LSU standpoint, if you think about it, I mean, if they can lose their 3rd game here 6 weeks into the season or whatever, I almost want to move this one up, because I feel like you may rank this one at 3, but I may surprise you, and I may go Georgia, Kentucky here. And I know that's going to be very surprising to some people to have this.
Can't make up your mind, can you?
I may go Georgia, Kentucky here, and here's why: because our man Blaine has kind of said this, and I mean, does this feel similar to the Georgia Tennessee game last year, where you've got the red hot SEC East team coming in, and a little bit differently in terms of offensive consistency to this point than that Tennessee team last year, the Kentucky team this year. But I don't know, man. I'll see, and I'll see what happens in this one. But like, I could see Georgia pretty much, if let's call it what it is, Chris. If Kentucky doesn't pass the ball better, if they're not more consistent in the passing game, they're going to have a hard time in this game. I think their defense is good, but I worry about this road matchup when all I feel like the talk has been outside of last week, where Ray Davis just has a ridiculous game. I feel like there's been so much talk about, well, Kentucky still hasn't kind of turned it on yet, and they've been inconsistent here, or haven't done this right, and I don't know. Like, I just feel like this is you hate to be in that spot heading into Georgia, but they did kind of flip it a little bit last week and play well against Florida. So I don't know. I may put this game at 3. I mean, I don't have a hard set ranking like you do, I know, but I may put this one at 3.
Who do you think my number 3 game is?
I'm going to say your number 3 is going to be LSU, Missouri.
You are wrong.
Oh, there's a first. Well, then it's got to be Georgia, Kentucky.
It is.
Yeah,
and for a lot of, I just wanted to see you squirm and do that.
Well, you
that
put me on. I don't
fun.
have my heart. I honestly, I'm not good at this. I didn't even have my rankings written down. I told you I was going to do this on the fly. So that's what you get.
Thanks. Well,
Prepper.
I have 2 things. Okay, I want to see Devin Leary play better. I think there's a better performance in there than we've seen. Just the fact that we are now in October and we are saying this concerns me. And number 2, it's on the road. I wish this game, I wish to God this game was in Lexington, because then I think it'd be super interesting. But I just get the feeling that gravity is going to take over. Georgia still might be, even with what is at times been underwhelming performance. I think that's fair to say by Georgia standards. I still think there's going to come some point in which we see Georgia unleash the mercy of hell on somebody. And, I don't know if it's going to be Kentucky, but at some point it's going to be somebody.
I tell you, all the bettors are on Kentucky, man. This line has moved way on down there, and it may get to 14. I think it's going to get to 14 by game time. And if it does, I tell you, Chris, that's going to be interesting, because
what has the line movement been?
Well, what did it start as? I mean, I'll look it up. But how about this, Chris? While I look this up, and I'm going to reload my screen here, and I've also got to let the beast known as Barry, the Wonder Dog, inside. So I'm going to reload my screen here. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to get you a line moving on Kentucky, Georgia, and I want you to tell everyone about my perfect franchise while I do that real quick.
I will do that. We are able to do this because of sponsors, and sponsors like myperfectfranchise.net. If you're at that point in your life where you're not really sure what comes next, what you want to do, maybe you're burnt out on your current work situation or any number of reasons, sit down with my friend Andy Ludicky at myperfectfranchise.net. What they do is they sit down and they will talk to you and get an inventory of your skills, what you want to do, all those good things. And the goal is to place you with a franchise that allows you to get out of life what you're looking to get out of life, whether that's more time with your friends and your family, whatever that looks like, financial goals. They will take an inventory of what you bring to the table, and then they work with all kinds of franchises so they know how it goes at those places backwards and forwards. They try to make a match between you and another franchise, and the consultation is free. They do not get some sort of a extra bonus or something for placing you with one franchise over another. No, they're just trying to make the best match they can in good conscience. Andy does a fabulous job of doing that. Go check them out today at myperfectfranchise.net. Tell them you heard about him on the Southeastern 14 Daily Show, and I think you'll be really happy that you did.
All right. So I didn't realize it started this high, and this may be a misprint, but can anyone confirm that this line opened at Georgia minus 24?
What?
It's got to be a misprint, but Vegas Insider says that it opened at 24. I thought it was like 17.5 or 18. So any way you slice it, though, this number is moving in Kentucky's favor in a big way. Like I said, I'm looking at like FanDuel and all that. It may get to 14 by tomorrow for Kentucky. So yeah, I mean, this is one where, and look, if you're just looking at the numbers too, right? And we're not just saying this from a betting standpoint, but we are kind of tying this into our rankings of how the game could unfold, right? I mean, Kentucky's 4-1 against the spread this year. Georgia's 1-4. So like Georgia's the team that you are absolutely fading this year on the spread, because you saw it at Auburn, you've seen it in some of these other games. And so I think that's probably the thinking there, is betting the undefeated underdog on the road that just had a guy rush for almost 300 yards, and I mean is pretty much covered against everyone, even if it hasn't been perfect all the time. Kentucky is taking care of their business, and so yeah, it's quite a setup, and that's why it was hard for me to put this one at number 3 on mine. But here's the best way to put it, and Kentucky fans probably won't like it, but if let me ask you this: if you had to rank these by blowout potential, would you say there's more blowout potential in Georgia, Kentucky than there is LSU, Missouri, and Alabama, Texas A&M?
I think so.
So I think that maybe is what. And I mean, look, the line's bigger too, right? So like the line's 2 touchdowns for a reason. So I mean, it's kind of one of those things where you're kind of setting it at that. So maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. I'm very curious because this is that first big test for Kentucky, and we always say it's hard to. And look, we're 6 weeks into the season now, but like this is that big test. Like Florida was a test, right? But I think even we said we weren't real sure about Florida still, even after the Tennessee game. That was a team we had ranked second to last in the SEC coming into the season. You and I did. We had them much lower than everybody else. And so I don't know. This is just one of those where like I want to see Kentucky do this and make this a game going into the final few minutes of the fourth quarter. But yeah, I'd like to see that before maybe I bank on that happening. So
okay,
we'll see.
I'm in my head coming up with the list of reasons why this has blowout potential, and then that little alarm went off. Said, you know what, you need to check one thing. So I'm flipping through Phil Steele.
By the way, Andrew's right here. I mean, he's completely right. The last part of Andrew's statement is everything. Devin Leary has to play well. If he doesn't play well,
yeah,
there you go. So.
Well, and they've been turnover prone, and that's part of it. I mean, you could go and play toe to toe and throw a couple of pick sixes, which is how Kentucky beat Vanderbilt, among other things, a couple of weeks ago. That could go against you, and you can't spot Georgia points like that. So I'm going through Georgia's schedule last year, and you had 1 week Georgia beat Oregon 48-3. Couple weeks later, beat South Carolina 48-7. Next week, beat Kent State 39-22. Next week, beat Missouri 36-22. That was about this time last year. And then Georgia just went into killer dogs mode for the rest of the season. Other than that, other than 2 games, one was the Ohio State game, and the other would have been the Kentucky game, which was 16-6. The year before, 30-13. The year before, 14-3. The year before, 21-0, and the year before that, 34-17. Now, look, I know some of those are double-digit spreads there. Probably most of them are, but, I mean, Georgia's beaten other teams in that span by 40, 50 points, and so I could make an argument on both sides that there's a recipe there for Georgia to blow people out because Georgia eventually, the last few years, just wakes up and just beats the living tar out of 4 or 5 teams, and it just might be Kentucky's week, but history doesn't really suggest that. History says that even when Georgia is kicking the tar out of everybody else, Kentucky is in there keeping it close. And certainly this is a Kentucky program that I think is at a better point than some of those other ones that hung in there and lost by 17 or whatever the differentials there were.
Yep. So you and Stuart Lackey will talk all about this Kentucky team. That'll be up on our channel this afternoon. So if you're a Kentucky fan, Chris and Stuart talk a lot about, this matchup heading into it, what we've seen from Kentucky so far, and what you can expect in this game. Because like I said, it's one that I could see going a lot of different ways here. But yeah, I'd probably still rank it third, even though it's a battle of 2 undefeated teams. I maybe still do that just because maybe it's the trust in Georgia and it's just the wanting to see it from Devin Leary in the passing game because I think that's going to have to be how they beat Georgia. I think it's going to be, Ray Davis probably going to put up 280 this week. So, yeah, but that's why it's number 3, Chris.
Blake, I understand why schedules are the way they are because everybody wants to jump in and dip their toe in the water with the Furman or New Mexico State to start the season. But like, how many weeks have we had this season where we would have killed for this matchup? We've been talking about it all week, and it's third on our list.
Well, and again, that is subjective too. We are just
Right.
making this based on certain things, but for most people, I'd say this is number 1 on their list, and that's perfectly fine.
Sure.
Because I think it is it's that big a game for both teams, but it is kind of the setting, night game in Athens. Blaine's brought that up stat wise, and how Georgia's played there, and those kind of, it's just like it is one of those things where I'm very curious to see what Kentucky does here because again, if you want to draw the parallel to the Tennessee game last year, all that, but like Andrew said too in the comments, like there are a lot of things going for Kentucky right now in terms of like this type of matchup, certain position groups being in as good a spot as they've been in, but defending national champion 2 times here for a reason, Georgia, and haven't lost a game in forever. They just find ways. So betting wise, Chris, as of right now, I'd probably do Kentucky while it's 14.5. I mean, give me a 2 touchdown underdog here that's undefeated. But yeah, it's hard to pick against Georgia, and when Georgia gets going, games can get out of hand sometimes with them, but they haven't so far. So in terms of SEC competition, so we'll see.
Well, and for all the talk about Kentucky could upset here, and it could. I've seen crazier things happen. You start to look at betting markets and computers and things like that, and they're just not believing. I was looking at national title odds today, and I think Georgia on FanDuel, MGM, a lot of places like that, still the top odds of anybody in the country. Actually, it might even be Oklahoma, but I think Georgia was right there pretty close. Well, I think Georgia was one. I think Oklahoma, here's what I got confused. Oklahoma was number 1 in FPI, where Georgia is 31.8% to make the playoffs. That's probably lower than they are other places. And Kentucky 0.2%. So I don't even know if Kentucky's on a board of a top, 10 or 12 anywhere to win the national title despite being unbeaten. But Vegas, the computers are still buying Georgia's legitimacy a lot more than they are Kentucky's. So
there you go.
Which happens when you're back-to-back national champs.
Let's do this because I think we're both going to have the same answer here. We both have Alabama A&M at 1.
Yes.
All right, because we're going to preview Missouri LSU. We'll go a little bit more in depth on that game. So let's just go ahead and call it what it is. I would put Alabama A&M at 1 for me. I just think the storyline set up even for an A&M team that's unranked. Like this is just we've been talking about A&M all year long. The Miami game, what didn't look good there, but everything else that's looked good around that game. Alabama seemingly getting back on track. I just think the setup here, it's that afternoon CBS game, and I think it's just there's something about it that, it's just to me the most must see game of the week. Even though I think Georgia Kentucky's must see, I think Missouri LSU's must see. But yeah, like this is just one that I would probably rank at the top. So, and then we'll go back to LSU Missouri in a second.
Yeah, in our heads, the narrative, at least was in mine, is that game was always close, right? Because last year, Jimbo Fisher, even with a sub 500 team, came within 1 yard of beating Alabama. And the year before that, it was, let me double check. A&M won that game 41-38. But the 3 before that were all, I think, 20-plus points. So, that's a little bit more recent. Alabama has blown some of those A&M teams out. But I think nobody would debate that the Alabama teams handing out the whippings were a lot different than this one. It's fascinating to me because you look through, you watch Alabama, you watch them against Texas and go, Texas is clearly the better team. You watch them against South Florida and you're like, this looks like a a mid-level American Conference team. And that was a one-off situation. It was different. You had some dynamics around the quarterback room and all those things. I think Alabama sort of no-showed that day, but it is what it is. And then you look up and you still see an Alabama at the top of some of the computer rankings. I'm not buying it when you're not averaging 6 yards a play at this point of the season, which I think they're not. I just don't buy you as a national title contender, even though I think that defense is really good. But this, to me, it's number one because it is a game that I think – tell me if you agree with this. Winner is in the national title discussion at that point, right?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe on the further fringes than some of the other teams, but they're in the conversation. Losers done.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what it comes down to. Yeah.
And not only that, losers got a narrative attached to it. And if it's Alabama, it's see the dynasty is over. And if it's Jimbo, it's he can't win the big one. We need another guy. And where does it go from each team? Because at that point, the loser has missed expectations, and then get everyone's attention and keeping them fighting going forward takes on a life of its own, potentially.
You said it. I don't really have anything to add. I mean, yeah, I think that's all those reasons are why this game to me is probably at the top, just because of what's at stake. Like, again, not to say there's not anything at stake with Georgia, Kentucky, and Missouri, LSU, but like it's just like you said, losing, you're done. Like that's it. Like I mean, your national championship hopes are gone. Yeah, like, and I know people say, well, 2 lost last year, and I just, yeah, this year though is different, right? You see all the teams.
Yeah.
We've talked about all the other teams outside the SEC, that how good that group is this year, and how many of those spots are already, like we said, that's where a Georgia losing or something along the way. And let's say everybody else kind of stays the course, does what you expect. That's where things get interesting from the SEC standpoint, just given everybody else that's out there, whether it's Texas, whether it's, Pac-12, whether it's Michigan, Ohio State, like all those teams, right? That's where things get really interesting for the SEC. So Florida State, I mean, it can get wild if you see one of these top teams in the SEC, again, like a Georgia specifically, lose a game because, that's where things get kind of weird the rest of the way. So, yeah, I don't know. So we'll see. But I mean, yeah, look, Andrew brings it up. I mean, look, yes, if they lose two, can still get in the conversation. So I just think that I don't know why. I just think this year's harder because I think you've got more opportunities for I think there's much better chance that Florida State can go undefeated. Like I'm not saying they're going to, but if you look at those teams that are ahead, right, Chris? We know Michigan, Ohio State, someone's going to lose a game there. But then at that point, right, it's still if you just go to the AP poll this week. I know we themed this entire show on Missouri and LSU, so we're going to get to that game in a second, guys. Kind of the main event here, but Michigan unbeaten, Texas unbeaten, Ohio State unbeaten, Florida State unbeaten, Penn State unbeaten. I mean, again, the Big Ten teams we know are going to play in the different format games, but Washington's still unbeaten, Oregon's still unbeaten, USC still unbeaten, and look, we're not even halfway through the season, but those teams are going to have to play each other. Games will be lost, but that's where I think you're going to have a lot more of those teams that won loss this year that are in the conversation versus there have been some years where it's like you have a 2-loss team in the SEC that ranks ahead of some of those teams. I just don't see that happening this year. I think it's going to be much harder.
Yeah, I had some show prep today that we decided to cut, and I think I'm glad I did because I want to dig in it a little bit more, and I think it could be a much more interesting show that way. But I was running off. I was looking up college football playoff odds this morning just to see what the spectrum of opinion looked like, and unfortunately, you get a lot of national title odds, but not a lot of just to make the playoff odds. But one place that does it is ESPN with its FPI. How many teams do you think ESPN FPI has with a 2% chance or greater at making the playoff?
15.
17. So you're close. And if you take it down to 0.5%, that number gets to 23.
How many of those are SEC teams?
You have got, well, 2 coming in next year in Oklahoma, Texas, which are 1-3. You got Georgia checking in at 6. You got Alabama at 9. A&M at 16, Tennessee at 18, LSU still at 19.
I just don't see it with LSU.
And that's it. Kentucky is outside that 0.5% at 0.2, and I don't think any other SEC team got even a 0.1% unless I've missed someone. So
Here's what LSU still has going for it. It still plays Alabama. It still plays Texas A&M, right? And I think that's – but, you have to win out. Like, there's no other – there's
right.
no debate on that. Like, you have to win every game the rest of the way. You have to beat Alabama. And, look, if that happens, then sure. Like, then we don't know where the SEC West title race is. And by that point, going into it, you're on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7-game winning streak going into the SEC championship game or whatever, if that's how they end up. But – given how that defense been playing, that's a hard thing to ask for, I think, for LSU right now. To win 7 in a row the rest of the way, given the schedule, playing at Missouri, still got to go to Alabama, still got to play A&M. Yeah, it's just going to be tough. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, let's go through the loser hypotheticals here. Okay, Alabama loses that game. What it's banked so far is a win over Ole Miss, which granted looks better than it did a week ago. You run the table, you will have wins over Tennessee, LSU, at Kentucky, at Auburn. I mean, that's not a horrible resume, but it is 2 losses. And if you're A&M, here's what that looks like. You have banked not a lot of consequence, wins over Auburn and Arkansas, and you will have to win at Tennessee, South Carolina, at Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Abilene Christian, and Alabama. I mean, look, if you put together road wins at Tennessee, at Ole Miss, at LSU, that's pretty gaudy at that point. I still don't think you probably get in with 2 losses, but again, it's going to depend on everybody else.
Yeah, like I said, I think there's too many. The scenario of 2 losses this year, I think it's going to be harder for SEC teams because I think there are too many. But again, we say that, and yes, I get it. Like,
these things are
people can
impossible
lose
to
games.
predict.
Like, it's
Right.
college football. People are going to lose games probably. Like, not everybody. Somebody's going to slip up somewhere. We see this all the time. And so, yeah, it's just I still think, though, you're banking on some combination of a Florida State, the Pac-12 winner, Texas or Oklahoma, maybe if they go unbeaten. Then you've got the Big Ten teams. I mean, there's a solid 3 or 4 or 5 teams right there that I think are not going to fall beyond probably the top 7 or 8 in that discussion. Like, I think you'll probably have multiple Big Ten teams. Florida State will be in there, probably even with 1 loss if it's not a bad loss.
Well, Florida State's interesting, and maybe we'll get to that one.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
let's save that because we still got to get to this game, and we've kind of hyped it up as we were talking Missouri LSU, and we got about 15 minutes left here. So, all right, so we're both putting this at 2. Your thoughts on Missouri LSU as what you've got on your notes there?
Okay, my thoughts, and I pointed this out to Gavin yesterday. I know you were not on the show, and so some people are hearing this for the second time, but this might be the first for you. The line of thinking on this one is fascinating. By the way, my reasons, as much as I'm a stats and look at the computer guy, because I think they get a lot right, but my reasons are going to kind of fall a little bit more outside that. But the run of the gamut here in terms of what the computers in Vegas think is fascinating. Because on one hand, you've got SP Plus has got Missouri as a 4-point favorite in this one. Then you go to Jeff Sagarin, which has got LSU as a 4-point favorite. You go to Vegas, which has got LSU as a 6.5-point favorite last I checked. ESPN's FPI has got LSU by 7. And then Team Rankings has got LSU by 10. And those are all places I respect for different reasons. Blake, we are sitting here, the midway point of the college football season is Saturday. And we have a 14-point difference in what different places think of this game. And for among other things, that is one reason I find this game fascinating and at a higher place on my list than Georgia and Kentucky, which I think I feel like I've got a little bit better grasp of what's going to happen there.
Yeah, I think it's just, to me, it's what we've seen from LSU plus I think now having real, kind of data to support how good Missouri is. And I think it's like early on in the season, you were looking at the schedule and, I talked about it. Like, look, they could be 5-0, but it's just you wanted to see how they played to get there. And we're like, are they going to win a lot of those ugly games defensively? Was that going to be the story? Like, maybe they did get to 5-0 and get to this game, but maybe they've won games 20-13 and 14-12 and all those kind of games. Then you're like, all right, maybe you get tested here by this LSU offense. But it hasn't been that way. Like, defense has played well, but the offense has been a big reason. I mean, a huge part of the story here. And if not the reason why they've gotten to this point, and how much, that Brady Cook to Luther Burden connection has just blossomed to the point to where these guys are just doing things that are ridiculous at times. And now you play a defense that just gave up a gazillion points, against another SEC team. And it just feels like a great setup for Missouri. I like my VEASAN stats too. I mean, like, I'm looking at some of VEASAN. They have like the systems and all that. Like, it's a bunch of like statistical trends and everything and how they match certain teams and certain matchups. Like, I'm looking at, they've got like, this thing I'm looking at is 14, 15 systems, something like that. Missouri is like a match in a ton of these in terms of like playing them against, in this matchup as, what are they, 6.5-point underdogs or something like that. So not necessarily win, but like just in terms of the spread and where things sit here. So I feel like there's a lot of things in Missouri's favor heading into this game, specifically the LSU defensive side. I know Sam's asking about LSU's defensive problems. I mean, we talked about winning the game last week, right? We said if the one thing you're going to be concerned about if you're LSU in this game at Ole Miss is the secondary. And Brian Kelly said it himself about the inexperience, all that kind of stuff, and guys' chemistry, trying to do too much, all those kind of things. But I mean, I guess, Chris, I don't have a better answer, but it's, it's not been good. So,
yeah, if you want a pretty good take on LSU's situation, when I go to check on LSU, the guy that I listen to down there is Matt Moscona, who's on our show at times, and that's for a reason. He's got a daily LSU podcast, which is really good, and his episodes this week have been great. I won't spoil it, but he's got some theories on why LSU is struggling so much at defensive backed up by facts. He had Jake Crane on the show also. Jake had kind of a different take, and I'll let you guys listen to the show, but if you're interested in digging into that level of detail, Matt did a fantastic job. He and Jake this week looking at a couple different things. But there's another comment in here, Blake, that I wanted to touch on because it's a little bit of a tangent of the reason that I'm so bullish on Missouri to win this game. And look, I don't know. LSU still got a ton of talent. LSU's offense, in the midst of all this garbage with the defense, is putting up numbers on pace to where it's going to be the best offense in the history of the school, probably except for the one that Joe Burrow ran, which might have been the best offense in the history of college football. I mean, it's approaching that kind of level where it is second only to that bunch in terms of how good LSU offenses have been. But the defense has been so bad that has obscured that lately. But Robert makes a point. He says Mizzou seems like a methodical team, not too many ups and downs in their play. And look, what gets attention and highlights, it is your Ricky Pearsall catches. It is your eye-popping statistical performances. It is those things that catch our eye and get us excited rather than as the mundane. And I mean this in a good way. The poster child for mundane in a good way is Brady Cook. Did you happen to notice last weekend, Blake, that Brady Cook set an all-time SEC record? Did you catch that?
I believe I caught that.
Yeah, and what was it for?
Was it for what was it? the
Most passes in the
without a
SEC consecutively without an
without an
interception. He's, I
interception.
think,
Yeah.
over 360 now. The old record, I think, was 348. I think he is now 62 from breaking the all-time. I don't know if it's the FBS record, college, whatever. He is now in that discussion to where a couple more games like this, and Brady Cook is going to be making big history beyond just the league. And I watched that game. As most of you know who are here every week, we are in the Nashville area. I was in the press box for Vanderbilt, Missouri. And I get that Vanderbilt's secondary is lacking in a big way, but hello, meet LSU, which cannot stop the pass either. And what did Brady Cook do? He sat there and he picked Vanderbilt apart all freaking day. In fact, I don't know why Eli Drinkwitz called a run play. He was that good. I mean, it's pitch it up to Luther Burden, let him turn around, make an over shoulder grab in the end zone. It's get Theo Weiss involved. They can dump it off to the backs. And the thing is, LSU's defense has got to get off the field. But best way to keep an offense on the field is to not turn it over, which Missouri does not do, and to not throw a bunch of incompletions to where you're punting the ball. And he's completing, I don't know, 73, 74% of his passes. I just think that persistent dinking, and they don't even dink a dunk. He takes some shots downfield. I think the inability of LSU's defense to get off the field based on what we've seen is a nightmare matchup for what Brady Cook brings, and that is why I picked Missouri to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, LSU allowing, 13.3 yards per completion. That's like 108th nationally. It's just loud stuff everywhere. 6.5 yards per play, 121st nationally. 429 yards a game, 117th nationally. That's just wild, isn't it? Think about the conversation we were having about LSU defense one of the season. And yeah, you look at those numbers and you're just like, man, that is brutal. So yeah, and I mean, penalties too. I mean, that's something else that's there are a lot of things absolutely that Missouri can take advantage of. Something else here, I always find this interesting when I kind of start to dig into these games. The first thing I like to look at is like what game flow, right? And someone just asked about game flow in terms of like, you know, and this is a question we'll get to in a second, like in terms of how does Missouri stop Jaden Daniels? I think that's a fair question too.
Yes.
But if you look at it from a numbers standpoint, I mean, LSU is allowing, I think it's 8.2 points in the first quarter, which is like, again, ranks pretty low nationally. The fourth quarter, they're allowing like almost or about 13 points a game in the fourth quarter, which is 133rd nationally, Chris.
Ooh.
So I'm looking at this from covers. So they are basically allowing almost 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And look, let's keep this in mind too. The Ole Miss game inflates some of those numbers because that was such a crazy game. But when you think about it, right, they gave up. Think about how the Florida State game.
Though.
I mean, yeah, but the Florida State game. Think about how that played out from the middle towards the end of the third quarter and beyond. So yeah, I mean, it's like that's the thing is they've been pretty good, kind of in the middle, but slow start. Issues at the end of the game, like that's the worst kind of combination, and that's why they're giving up as many points as they have. And so yeah, I mean there's a lot Missouri can do here, Chris, to take advantage of this LSU defense. And again, that's why Missouri, I think your confidence in them has gotten to the point that it's gotten to, is because they're not doing it the way that some of us thought they were going to have to do it. They're not doing it by just grinding teams out, winning 20 to, like I said, just low scoring games. They're able to keep up offensively. Question is, in this one, can you keep up against the LSU team that offense has not been an issue with this team? And they are going to do, they're going to put Missouri in a point like American Patriot says here. The pace is going to be, this is an up-tempo game here where LSU is going to go, and they're going to have big play potential. I pointed out the stat before last week, 7 players of 40 or more yards or 40 or more yards on a single play this season. So like game-breaking potential across the board for LSU. And certainly Missouri has some of those guys, but yeah, it's interesting both ways here.
Well, the funny thing about SEC football is that one play at the end that decides the game shapes the narrative of so much we talk about the next week. And look, if LSU gets one stop somewhere or gets one more touchdown at the end or field goal or whatever, LSU wins the game, then what are we talking about? We're talking about Brian Thomas. We're talking about Malik Neighbors. We're talking about Jaden Daniels and how unstoppable that offense has been, which it is. And instead, the defense has been so bad that has formed the basis of the narrative for what we have talked about with this team. But that's going to be a killer matchup on the other side too, because Chris Abrams-Drain at corner, I think, has had a pick 3 straight weeks, looked really good. I think is one of Pro Football Focus's highest rated corners in the country. And it's Rakestraw across from him. It's been a competent DB in his career. They've got experience at safety. They've got Tyrone Hopper on the back end. Oh, and they got Darius Robinson coming back, I believe, who didn't play last week, presuming that calf is better. But I think a lot of the focus is on Brady Cook and what they can do. Hey, that matchup on the other side too is going to present some problems for Missouri defense. Has been pretty good. Maybe not elite, but pretty good.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, it's been, like you said, maybe it's not been to the elite point yet, but they've still found a way to make big plays. I think when they've had to in some of these games, and look, there will be no better example of that than this game, because I think this is easily the most challenging offense they have seen so far, and that's not even a question in my opinion. And so it's one of those things where I'm just very curious to see how Missouri approaches this from a defensive standpoint, knowing what you're going up against, which we can say that about both sides, but we've already talked about the LSU side defensively, and everybody knows the issues there. They've been much more glaring, I think. But Missouri defensively, how they approach trying to sort of contain all these different guys, and really
And
just
they got
trying to.
more than those two. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, it's one of those things where that's not an easy task when you play a team like this. But again, if you are Missouri, though, the good thing is you feel like this year, if you give up a touchdown, let's say you give up a big touchdown 3 minutes into the game, all right, give up a 65-yard play, like Neighbors goes off. Well, whereas in past year, last year especially, right, it's like you were just clawing to get those points last year. But now it's like, we'll go out and Brady Cook will lead us on a drive. We won't make a mistake here. We'll get the ball to Luther Burden. He'll go out and make a 45-yard play of his own. And boom, we're down to the 20. We're in scoring position. We'll tie this thing up in 5 minutes. That's the confidence now for Missouri. Whereas
Yeah.
last year it was much different. And I think that's why this game is so intriguing, is because now you've got that confidence. And yeah, I mean, it's like Ryan says here. Yeah, it's pretty simple. You just got to shut down, not take anything away from the LSU running game. Like, you got to shut down what that team can do through the air. And yeah, I love this matchup. I think it's going to be so fun. And early kick, that's another one where, what's it, the last game these two teams played? 2020, 45-41. Remember that? That was a wild game. I don't remember all the specifics, but that was a game that was just nuts. So yeah, I mean, another game. I think that 45-41 here, I wouldn't be shocked if we got to that point in this game. But
Yeah. All right, Blake, parting thoughts, comments from the gallery of fans here. Anything else you want to get to on our way out?
well, quickly, Sam brought up earlier, if we had to rank the games, I mean, I think Texas Oklahoma would have a pretty good shot
Well,
at number
that's
one if they were
one.
here this year. But they'll be here next year, and we'll talk a lot about Texas and Oklahoma. And another good point here, I think, in terms of like, you're not going to have a lot of unbeaten teams, I think, with Texas and Oklahoma. This year and that's where like the college football playoff changes, right, are going to help.
Yeah.
Whereas it has felt like if you don't go undefeated, or, it's okay, like, that's been more the case for conferences outside the SEC. Whereas, the SEC, you always feel like you got a little wiggle room there, which again, we saw kind of last year and how that played out at times. But yeah, so should be a fun week of games, and we'll keep talking about them on the SEC Football Daily this week. And check out all of our other stuff, guys, on the channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Remember, if you want to advertise or sponsor with any of our shows here on the channel, you can do that. caroline.smith at southeastern14.com, email, and reach out. We love to have you, promote your business, your product here on the channel. So we always appreciate it. You can also join that It Just Means More tier. If you hit that join button, $3.99 a month, you join us and you're just donating to the channel. Help us do more videos for you guys. We do. We put up 100 and something videos, 140 videos, I think, in the last 30 days. Now, some of those are clips, but still, you guys understand what we're saying here. We put out a lot of content for you guys. So if you want to help us out, that's the best way to do it. And yeah, Chris, we'll have more fun stuff on the way. SEC basketball show gets started next week too. So yeah.
And we neglected to shout out our other sponsor, CHOMPS. If you were looking for the
CHOMPS.
perfect snack to watch a game, listen to your, I don't know what I said.
Snap into a CHOMPS.
Snap it through a CHOMPS.
I think that's someone else's tagline, but we're going to use it for this one. So
I think I'm lacking protein. I'm running out of steam here at the end, but best way to get your protein, get CHOMPS. 9 to 10 grams a stick. It tastes great. It is free of all kinds of allergens and fillers and bad stuff, gluten-free, no hidden harmful ingredients, and it tastes great. They've got all kinds of flavors. So start with a trial pack of 6 different flavors. Pick your best one. And again, promo code for 15% off. So help out the folks who help our show. All right. Rest of the week, we'll probably have Andrew Hutchinson on. We're working with him to see if that's tomorrow or Friday based on his schedule. Hope to get Trey Wallace back this week, and we will come up with something new and different those next 2 days. Best way to catch it, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics. Also, so for Blake Lovell, I'm Chris Lee. We are the SEC Daily at Southeastern 14. We appreciate you all watching. God bless you. We'll see you again soon.